Hey guys, in this video we're in chapter 6 on periodic functions, and we're in section 2 going over the graphs of other trigonometric functions. So we're working through problem 25, which says sketch two periods of the graph of the function. Identify the stretching factor, the period, and the asymptotes. And we're given f of x equals tangent of x plus pi over 4. So if you look on page 526 on your book, it will give you the general form of the tangent function. So that looks like this. We've got f of x equals a times tangent of b times x minus c plus d. And in context of this equation, we have an a, a b, and a c, and an invisible d. The d equals 0 in this case. So what do these mean? We have the a, the absolute value of a is going to be equal to your stretching factor. And the stretching factor is going to tell you how much you stretch the tangent graph by. And then to find our period, we're going to have, our period is going to be equal to pi over the absolute value of b. So in this case, if we're going through, we have our stretching factor is going to be our absolute value of a. And our a in this case is 1, so we have a stretching factor of 1. We have a period of pi over the absolute value of b. In this case, our b is 1. So our period is going to be pi. Also on page 526, you'll see that we get vertical asymptotes wherever we have x equals this c divided by b plus pi over 2 times the absolute value of b times k, where k is going to be any odd integer. Okay, so we've got our period and our stretching factor. Now we're going to look for vertical asymptotes. So we'll find a couple of these. We have vertical asymptotes at x equals, in this case we have a c. Here's pi over 4 in our c position. We notice that it has to be a minus. So this pi over 4 is going to become a minus a negative pi over 4. So that our c is going to be equal to negative pi over 4. So that means we have our c divided by our b. We have negative pi over 4 divided by 1, which is going to be negative pi over 4 plus pi over our b is 1. So we have 2 times 1 is 2. Times k. So these are where all of our vertical asymptotes are going to occur. And now that we have our stretching factor, our period, and our vertical asymptote, we can go ahead and graph, we can sketch the two periods of the graph of this function. Okay, so we'll go ahead and graph this f of x equals tangent of x plus pi over 4. So what we want to do first is we want to go ahead and graph our vertical asymptotes. So remember that k has to be an odd integer. So I'll plug in a couple. We can plug in k equals minus 1, k equals 1, k equals 3, and so on. So we'll start with negative 1. So we'll have an asymptote at x equals negative pi over 4. Plus pi over 2 times negative 1, or that's going to be equal to x equals negative pi over 4 minus pi over 2 is going to be negative 3 pi over 4. So if we're graphing this, we have a pi over 4 here, negative pi over 4. Here's negative pi over 2. Here's going to be negative 3 pi over 4. And we'll have a vertical asymptote running through it. Okay, where's our next asymptote going to be? We're going to plug in k equals 1. So at k equals 1, we're going to have an asymptote at x equals negative pi over 4 plus pi over 2, which is going to be equal to pi over 4 here. And going even further, here's going to be, this is our pi over 4, pi over 2, we have a 3 pi over 4, we have a pi, and we have a 5 pi over 4. Next we're going to plug in 3 for k. We're going to have x equals negative pi over 4 plus a 3 pi over 2. And that's going to be at our, let's see, 3 pi over 2. We're going to multiply that by 2, and we'll end up with a 5 pi over 4. So then we'll have an asymptote here as well. Cool, and it says sketch 2 periods of the graph of the function. So we have 3 asymptotes here, and we know that our tangent function is going to occur between those two, between each vertical asymptote, and we have a stretching factor of 1. So what we need to do is find where it's going to cross the x-axis, and it's going to cross the x-axis. Since there's no vertical shift here with the d, or d equals 0, it's going to cross at this point here at our c, and that's going to be shifted over to the left at a negative pi over 4 for the first one. And it's going to cross the x-axis there, and it's going to cross in the middle on this one as well. And don't forget to draw your arrows. So there we go. We found our stretching factor, our period, and our vertical asymptotes, and we've sketched 2 periods of the graph. I hope you found this video really helpful. The concepts we covered in this video are true no matter what pre-calculus class you take, and the examples I cover are from this textbook right here. And remember, if you're a Baylor student currently enrolled, there is free tutoring on the first floor of Sid Rich. You can create a one-on-one appointment online or drop in anytime during our business hours. Please visit our website, www.baylor.edu/tutoring, for more details. Sic 'em Bears.